is all done by robots. We'll go from farm to fork with Sharon Vaknin, and you're going to like what she's making with pears. And you may think you know what oats are. We'll take you down south to discover how sea oats are helping one community save their shoreline. It's all coming up on America's Heartland.
You can see it in the eyes of every woman and man in America's heartland, living close to the land. There's a love for the country and a pride in the brand. In America's heartland, living close to the land.
How does your garden grow? Well, forget that old nursery rhyme. If you have expert gardeners like they do here at the Floriculture exhibit at the California State Fair, you can pretty much count on majestic marigolds and other fancy flowers. But if you think that small plot of flowers or vegetables in your backyard is just small potatoes, well, think again. Horticulture, things like nursery stock, flowering plants, vegetable gardens, and even Christmas tree farms is a multi-billion-dollar business. Let's give you a little flowering trivia. Geraniums, impatiens, petunias, and pansies make up the list as the favorite garden flowers in the United States. And who's buying these plants and flowers? Well, California leads the nation in retail sales. Other popular planting places include Michigan, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is the first stop on our planting pilgrimage this time. Our Rob Stewart makes a stop at a nursery that has a very famous name.
Americans love their produce. Juicy red tomatoes are a favorite, and Tracy Lee knows all about them.
In my travels and in my job, I've done this for 12 years, and so I have tasted thousands and thousands and thousands of tomatoes.
Tracy Lee is the lead horticulturist for the Burpee Seed Company in Warminster, Pennsylvania.
One time I tasted in one trip 200 varieties of tomatoes in about 2 hours.
Tracy travels the world for seed selection and brings them here for production. And even in the dead of winter, spring and summer are the focus here. While the snow is still on the ground, Burpee will produce and package seeds for everything from corn to carrots, zinnias to zucchini. Some of this will go to stores and commercial farming operations, but city folks are also getting in on the farming act.
People are going back to growing for just good old homegrown flavor, to save money, to spend time with their families, to take advantage of what they have in their backyard by converting it from just a yard to a paradise.
This story of seeds began in the 19th century when the young W. Atlee Burpee became interested in plant hybrids. Today, George Ball directs the firm, living at Ford Hook Farm, the same spot where Burpee established his research and company.
This is the study where Mr. Burpee wrote the first catalogs, W. Atlee Burpee.
By the early 20th century, Burpee was reaching customers with millions of seed catalogs, catalogs that have become iconic agricultural treasures.
And he was only 18 when he started, so he was kind of a Bill Gates, type of thing, because seed was like a microchip in those days. So if you innovated on seeds, you innovated on the country's, foundation.
Burpee is credited with originating seeds for sweet corn, lima beans, and hybrids of zucchini and melons. And in 1895, he developed his own variety of iceberg lettuce.
And that really brought the lettuce to the American table, because lettuce wilts before the advent of the crisp head type, of which iceberg was the first.
So this greenhouse is Burpee's top secret.
Yeah, this is the top secret mad scientist laboratory.
Yeah, no photography, please.
Yeah.
The sign says right there on the
Yeah, well, you have
door.
some nice things coming in this greenhouse.
Despite the sign, we talked our way in, discovering the botanical work here focuses not only on plant growth, but other attributes as well.
Wider range of flavors, more textures, more interesting colors. Those are the things that you don't find in nature, but that nature has in her genes. And so through plant breeding, you can coax out these things that are locked up in the botanical world.
In addition to produce, Burpee is developing flowers, some with totally new scents.
That's a totally new smell.
We collect it in the wild, then we bring it over here and we do cross-fertilization of different types, again, to bring out those special things that in nature would not be found unless mankind kind of, does these little teasing out things.
That evolution of plants for our farms and gardens was a prime focus for W. Atlee Burpee, giving growers a chance to plant the seeds of change.
Gardening experience is very personal to the customer, and people do it for different reasons, and we're just happy that we're able to provide this product for them.
To protect a wide variety of genetic seed material, an Arctic seed vault has been created in Svalbard, Norway. The vault has a capacity of some 2 billion seeds. Dedicated to the preservation of crop diversity, the seed vault gathers material from crops and regions around the world and protects them in an underground vault set in Norway's frozen permafrost.
You may be one of those people who start your flower or vegetable garden from seeds, but lots of us like to use ready-made plants that give us a head start on the season. If that's the case, our Henna Cuevas says there's a good chance the plants in your garden come from one of the largest greenhouses in the United States.
A crane flies high above a sea of flowers, and a pulley system moves thousands of baskets high above the ground. This is Metrolina Greenhouses in North Carolina. And chances are, if you've ever planted a garden, you've purchased one of their products. Every year, more than 70 million plants, mostly annuals, are grown in this heated greenhouse, the largest in the United States. How big? It's more than 125 acres, or roughly the size of 5 shopping malls, and it uses the latest in plant technology.
One of the most impressive things here in the greenhouse is that everything's automated. How did you make that transition?
We came from Holland, and where we were born, and when the greenhouse industry over there's not much space, and so you have to use automation to use every inch of space you have.
Abe Van Wingerden is Metrolina's president. His family started the nursery in 1972. Back then, the greenhouse only occupied an acre.
What we do in the U.S. here, we're looking also at jobs people hate to do, whether it's bending over, whether it's having to reach over to grab something, whether it's a multiple repetitive thing they have to do over and over again. We look to find machinery and automation to make that happen.
One example of this automation is the transplanting machine. No human could plant this fast. Here, pots go onto a conveyor belt. The machine then adds the soil as the mechanical arms evenly space the plugs.
The transplanting machine has cut production time in half. It can plant 100 of these pots in a minute, 1,000 flats in an hour.
You cannot create a machine that makes it 100% perfect. So we always have a couple people to fix the missers that occur, and also to put the tags in. Each customer has a different tag, a unique code we have to put on it, and just quality control to assure the customer gets 4 plants in every pot or whatever it is for each size we're doing.
Are you amazed every time you look at the machine?
Oh, every day. We've had this machine just for a couple months, but we have 18 production lines, some machines for 10, 15 years, and I can walk every day and be amazed by what it does and the capability it has.
Metrolina is one of the few greenhouses in the world controlling the process from beginning to end, starting the plants from either seed or cuttings, growing them out, and shipping them directly to retailers.
And if we can control it right from the start, right from that seed or right from that cutting, we have the ability to control that and assure we get that what the customer wants.
But customers can be fickle. Believe it or not, what's hot and what's not in gardening varies from year to year, just like the fashion industry. Every year, breeders from around the world pitch their latest creations. At Metrolina, those deemed interesting enough are put to the test in this research house to see if they're worth investing in.
And what are some of the new things that are coming out on the market?
There's a ton of new things. There's a new campanula, which is right here. It's a new pink flower on it. It's a dwarf. These usually grow 3 or 4 feet tall. I saw it in Japan, but it's the first time I've seen it in bloom here. I'm like, oh, ladies are going to love that. That one's going to play.
Well, it just looks like a little bridal bouquet. It's just really pretty. It's already set and ready to go.
And that's what we're trying to create, is that drive-by appeal. And then another item is coleus. Coleus is an item we've been doing for years, but they're coming out with a lot of new colors, and this is one of them here called henna, which is a brand new color just on the marketplace this year.
These are usually bright red.
Yeah, they come in a variety of colors. In fact, there are over 500 varieties of coleus around the world, and we're just trying to find the 10 or 12 that consumer needs, from a light one all the way to a dark one, and this one kind of fits in that medium range.
Those that make the cut are then moved to this outdoor testing area. Here, the plants are grown under conditions similar to those they'll face after they're sold. Buyers who don't believe in fertilizer or even watering. If they can make it here, then they've passed the test.
For most customers, it's an emotional value. It's the value of planting that plant, knowing you did it yourself, and just the joy of watching it grow and enjoying that on a constant basis.
Everything here is big, including how much water is used, more than 1 million gallons a day. The greenhouse has an automated irrigation system where every drop is captured and reused. The roof of the greenhouse can also capture rainwater to be used for irrigation. But here the plants aren't just watered from above. They also soak it from below, which is the best way to start a plant. Here the pots sit in pools. This forces the roots to grow deeper, making the plant stronger and taller.
I don't need that pint, no. Just need that Toonie wave, a deluxe, 2 deluxe, and a cocoa hanger basket.
Every day, more than 100 delivery trucks are loaded with flat after flat of blooming annuals. They'll make their way to garden centers mainly in the southern and eastern United States. Ben Wingerden says the key to their success is not just in the automation, but in the 800 people who work there. Machines, he says, simply allow employees to practice what he calls the art of gardening.
By freeing them up from those repetitive tasks, they can do what it takes to grow a plant, that art form it takes, that work it takes by staring at it and going, this plant needs more fertilizer, this plant needs more water. So that process works to help us grow a better plant long term.
There's a lot going on in North Carolina agriculture, both inside and out. Inside, the greenhouse nursery industry is the #1 crop producer in North Carolina. And if you're planting outside, you can match specific crops to specific soils. That's because North Carolina has 400 different types of soil to choose from.
You know, having a garden really allows us to try our hand at a bit of farming on a small scale. The best part? Really fresh fruits and vegetables. So you've brought in that harvest and you're ready to whip up something. Well, Sharon Vaknin is in the kitchen with some ideas on turning out a great recipe with some really popular produce.
A lot of sophistication, and they make great additions to savory dishes. With so many varieties to choose from, you can really get creative with this juicy fruit. Today we're making a pear and ricotta crostini with an orange syrup, along with roasted chicken with pears. Let's get to it. First, we'll need to make our orange syrup. It's really simple. It's just equal parts sugar, orange juice, and water. Give that a good whisk. And to add a little bit of tang, I'll also throw in some orange zest. Gives it a nice fresh flavor when we're using orange juice. Okay, so while our syrup is reducing, we'll get our bread cut for our crostini. I like to use a rustic style bread. French bread is also great. And we'll just cut it at a slant here. So we're using Bartlett pears here, which is your typical lunchbox pear. It's firm, it's got a nice crisp, fruity flavor, and it's perfect for pairing with our softer ricotta cheese and our tangier orange glaze. So our bread slices are good to go. We'll hit it with a little olive oil, also a nice fruity note to go with those pears. And we'll let that toast in the oven for just a few minutes. We just want a nice crisp golden brown effect. Now let's get the star of this dish set up. We've got our Bartlett pears right here. Gorgeous, juicy. I'm just going to core them. Then we'll cut them into nice thin slices for our crostini. So let's check on our bread. Should be nice and toasted by now. Oh yeah, these look Perfect. Nice and toasty, the olive oil doesn't hurt. We'll set them right on our serving dish. Now we can start putting these together. We've got our whole milk ricotta. Top of the ricotta goes our pear. Just fan them out. And now for my favorite part of this crostini, besides the pears of course, our homemade orange syrup. Now you want to be pretty generous with this because once you try it, you're going to want more. So we have chopped pistachios. For a bright flavor and color, basil. And there's our gorgeous appetizer, a pear and ricotta crostini with homemade orange syrup. Now let's get ready for our next dish using Anjou pears, something a little different for the palate. For this dish, I'm using Anjou pears. Reason being, they're much firmer and tangier than the Bartlett type, so they'll really stand up to the baking process and to the chicken. So first we need to make our dressing. And now we can get started on our vegetables and our pears. So I've got mushrooms here, just cut them in half and throw them in. And for our pears, I'll just core them and then throw them in there at about this size. Now I've already parboiled these fingerling potatoes, which is key because if you put them in raw, they actually won't be done by the time your chicken is done. So for these, just split them in half. They'll roast nicely. And with chicken, I almost always have to have onion, so we're also going to put some onion in there. For the onion, I'll slice it a little bit thinner than usual when roasting because I actually want them to caramelize, get a little sweeter. So nice thin slices like this will work. And give them a nice toss in the dressing. With all these ingredients dressed, they can go onto our roasting pan. Dump them on there. And of course, we can't forget about our chicken. Chicken goes into the same dressing. We'll hit these with a little more olive oil and salt. You always want your chicken well seasoned. Give these a nice workaround, pick up some of that dressing. And before this heads into the oven, one more key ingredient, garlic. So instead of peeling and chopping the garlic, which would get burned when it's roasting, I'll actually just smash it and throw it in there for aroma. And into the oven they go at 400 degrees for about 40 minutes or until these guys are cooked through. The kitchen smells good, so you know our roasted chicken and pears are ready. And that's what you call a perfect pairing. All the flavors have melded together. The paprika has given everything a really warm color. And the Anjou pears, because they're much firmer than other varieties, they've kept their shape during this roasting process. We've got two impressive dishes that show you just how sophisticated pears can be. With our roasted chicken and pears, I've added a little bit of arugula to give it a fresh kick, but also let the pepperiness of the arugula play with the freshness and the sweetness of the pears. And of course, here's our party-perfect appetizer, pear and ricotta crostini with an orange syrup. Now you know pears are much more than just a lunchtime snack.
You know, horticulture plays a role in not only giving us great vegetable and flower gardens, it can beautify our urban landscapes, help create one-of-a-kind parks, and provide real environmental benefits. Sarah Gardner says in one southern state, horticulture also plays a role in saving the shoreline.
If we didn't have these dunes with current sea level rise, we wouldn't have beaches.
Steve Mercer considers himself more than a farmer and a grower. He sees his role as important to saving a significant element in North Carolina's ecosystem.
And that ecosystem traps sand to build dunes. Those dunes protect not only property, but other ecosystems.
On this early May morning, Steve and his employees are planting sea oats. Critical to protecting North Carolina's shoreline, sea oats are tall grasses,
whose seed-topped plumes capture grains of sand driven by Atlantic Ocean winds. It was high winds that moved Steve into the sea oats business when the greenhouses for his bedding plant nursery were demolished by hurricanes. But these ill winds blew some good. Steve was contacted by the late David Nash, a North Carolina extension agent. He suggested that Steve change crops. Sea oats are well suited to saltwater environments. Their long root structure can stabilize loose soil and sand.
With the damage these hurricanes are doing, he said, I think you can grow a crop, grow sea oats as a crop, and sell that crop. He said, I think there's going to be a need.
When I first moved here, there were houses so close to the ocean that people could fish off the decks. People would rent the houses just so they could fish off the decks.
Harry Simmons is the mayor of Caswell Beach, North Carolina. Thousands of sea oat plants from Steve's nursery have helped reclaim and maintain acres of oceanfront property.
In fact, there's a stairway right over there. You used to have stairs, and now you have these gorgeous dunes with the sea oats.
Right. We had 5 or 6 steps there, and now it's all covered up with this sand that has been basically held here by these sea oats, attracted here, if you will, by these sea oats.
Sarah, this is one of our production greenhouses for sea oats.
Steve says that research by David Nash showed that native grasses fared better in the North Carolina sand than sea oats brought in from other states. Those variables prompted Steve to begin growing his own seedlings. Using successful techniques from his earlier bedding plant business, the sea oats get their start, where else? In water.
The method we use is hydroponics. We sow the seed in a styrofoam tray, float the tray in water. Plants get their nutrients from the water. We put just enough soil in there to hold the seed in place.
And this is what you're looking for when you pull these sea oats out and you're getting ready to transplant them. You want a really nice root ball at the base.
We do. When these plants first go on the beach, they're going to put all their energy into putting a root down into the water table. So we want to give them a head start on that, and that's one of the things that we've worked on hard here at our greenhouses, is to try to get a real healthy root ball, a dense mass of roots on the bottom of the plant, so that when they hit the hole, they're ready to grow.
The young sea oat plants take about a year to reach full maturity, eventually eliminating the need for the sand fencing which currently protects them.
Steve, how long ago did you plant these sea oats?
We planted these about 4 years ago. When we planted them, this beach was flat. So from the tide line back to underneath the steps was a flat sand beach, and we positioned these sea oats specifically to do what they've done, trap the sand right in front of these steps. But the main thing we wanted was to start establishing a new dune line in front of this structure in order to protect the structure, protect the dune that was already here from a storm, and ultimately protect the infrastructure that's behind that, whether that be houses, roads, in this case a lighthouse.
Well, I'm actually wondering about taking that walkway and bringing it down a little further.
As for Mayor Simmons, he says Steve's work has helped to protect barrier island and shoreline ecologies. That's improved property values while helping to save North Carolina's beaches.
It's a great benefit for not only the people who live here, but also the people who visit here. The town is owned by people from 28 different states around the country. It's hardly a local issue when you start talking about coastal property, because it's a national treasure.
That's going to do it for this time. Thanks for traveling the country with us on this edition of America's Heartland. We're always pleased that you can join us.
Before we go, just a reminder that you can find us online with some great things to discover at our website, including all those farm to fork recipes and, of course, video from all of our shows. Just log on to americasheartland.org. In addition, there's a lot going on in our social media arena. You'll find us there as well. We'll see you next time right here on America's Heartland.
You can see it in the eyes of every woman and man in America's heart, living close to the land. There's a love for the country and a pride in the brand. In America's heartland, living close to the land.
Carol Highsmith has been called America's photographer. She's been traveling the U.S. for more than 3 decades, taking pictures of the people and places that make America unique.
When I go out across America, what do I photograph? Everything. Someone said to me, well, why would you photograph the Golden Gate Bridge, for instance? Everybody's taking photographs of it. Yes, there will be images of the Golden Gate Bridge that may exist 500 years from now, but the ones that we know will exist in high resolution will be mine at the Library of Congress.
Highsmith is collaborating with the Library of Congress in Washington, the largest library in the world, to capture as many images as she can.
It's important that we have our beautiful scenes tucked away in a place that knows all about preservation.
Her vast collection, all copyright-free, includes many memorable images of America's national parks.
I've been to most of them, and it's everything from the spectacular and vast Grand Canyon to wintertime scenes of Yellowstone.
At Yellowstone, America's first national park, she was mesmerized by the bison.
I would say really in all the wildlife images I've taken, and I've taken a lot, the bison are the best in a sense that they look like they come from 100,000 years ago. You're looking at this vast, gorgeous landscape of Yellowstone, and the winter and the fall and the spring, and you're seeing the bison babies, and all of the calves, and you just think about, will this always be?
Highsmith shoots at all hours and every weather condition, and has even had to face her fear of flying.
So I finally get to Alaska, and I'm going to Denali, and I hire a plane to take me up there. The whole way there, I'm thinking, how can I get out of this? I just say, you must do it. So I did it. But to photograph it, and then to photograph Ruth Glacier, which is huge, and to know that maybe someday it'll be gone, it was just an experience and a half.
It's that fear of iconic American landscapes and landmarks one day disappearing that motivates her.
They say Yellowstone, it could just blow up. Will the bison be there in Yellowstone? The Washington Monument. We had an earthquake here in Washington, D.C. That whole thing could have just collapsed. So I'm just there to capture it as it looks right now.
Some of her experiences have been especially meaningful.
So I'm at Ford's Theater 150 years after Lincoln died, right there. And there are reenactors, and there was this man who held a candle, and that's how his face was lit. I thought, whoa, you can almost feel like what it must have felt like to be there at that night. I also photographed, for instance, the coat that Lincoln wore the night he died, with his bloodstains on it. So to be close to these artifacts is just incredible.
Carol Highsmith will be remembered not only for her work, but for the singular act of generosity that has defined her career.
I'm just glad to be there. I'm glad to have this as my job.
Julie Tabo, VOA News, Washington.
At least 6 people are confirmed dead and scores reports of others injured or missing as a massive fire engulfs a London high-rise. U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions denies any collusion with Russia to sway last year's presidential elections. And a U.S. congressman tells South Sudan's President Salva Kiir enough is enough with the man-made conflict. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Now, a massive fire at a high-rise apartment building has killed at least 12 people in the British capital on Wednesday. That's according to London's Metropolitan Police. The towering inferno totally engulfed and destroyed the huge structure. A number of patients are being treated at area hospital stands at 74, including 20 people in critical care. Authorities say the number of casualties is likely to rise. More than 200 firefighters and 40 fire engines responded to the blaze at the 24-story Grenfell Tower in London's North Kensington area. The blaze broke out at around 1 a.m. local time. They found the building engulfed in flames from the second floor up. Eyewitnesses say people were heard frantically screaming for help from the burning tower and spotted at windows trying to attract the attention of rescue crews. One resident described the chaotic situation inside the building.
Yeah, there was smoke everywhere, literally everywhere. There was people downstairs, there was bits of the block, the cladding falling off the block that was on fire. People screaming after a couple of minutes, because obviously people were still sleeping on the higher floors, so they didn't have a clue what was going on. I'm not even sure if half of them got out, to be honest with you. There was kids at the window, there was people flashing their phone lights just for help, but the fire brigade couldn't get upstairs.
Well, London Fire Commissioner Danny Cotton said the cause of the fire remains unknown. The London Fire Brigade says an inspection of the burned-out building deemed it safe for crews to remain. Smoke from the burning tower could be seen billowing over the London skyline at sunrise. Now, a spokesman for the British Prime Minister Theresa May says she is deeply saddened by the tragic loss of life in the Grenfell Tower fire. For the latest details on this tragedy, let's go to VOA Europe correspondent Luis Ramirez. Now, Luis, what more can you tell us about this incident?
Well, that fire, many hours later, is still burning, and I will say that talking to people out there, the grief is rapidly turning to anger, and that's as big questions start to come up on not only how did this fire start, but why did it spread so quickly. Witnesses said that from the moment it started to when it engulfed the whole building was about 30 minutes. It took that little time for the fire to go through this 24-story tower. And so the big questions at this moment, as police are telling us that the death toll is very likely to rise, because we're talking about a situation where, as I said, the fire is still burning and rescue crews are going floor by floor, very carefully making their way up and unfortunately discovering more victims.
Now, we have heard that this is a council building, as they call it in Britain, public housing essentially, and that recently it had been kind of, the management had been outsourced to a private company. Has that become an issue?
That's one of the many questions coming up. The fact is that this building had been only recently renovated. It was built in 1973, and it was just a year ago that it underwent a $13 million renovation. That's one of the big areas of questioning, because the issue is what kind of materials were used in that renovation. A lot of the residents who managed to escape reported smelling burning plastic, and so they are asking, did some of the building materials, were they flammable, were they fireproof? And another big question that's coming up is why were there no sprinklers, and in some cases, if there were sprinklers, why they malfunctioned. Residents also saying they didn't hear fire alarms. So these are all things that are coming into play in the investigation in the coming days. The fire commissioner saying that that investigation is going to take quite a while, and so is very careful not to draw any conclusions before then.
So as for the cause, nobody is thinking perhaps it's an act of terrorism or arson or whatever the case may be up to this point?
That could be in the back of a lot of people's minds because, of course, London has seen acts of terrorism to the rate of 1 per month in the last 3 months. However, there is nothing to indicate, absolutely nothing to officially indicate that this could be terrorism related. The fact is this building is a multi-ethnic community, people from all over the world living there, a very large contingent of Muslim or a large representation of Muslim families living there, along with senior citizens and many people from various African countries as well.
A terrible tragedy. Luis, thank you very much. That's VOA Europe correspondent Luis Ramirez. Now, tragedy also struck in the United States Wednesday. Congressman Stephen Scalise was shot in Alexandria, Virginia, just south of Washington, while he and other Republican congressional lawmakers were practicing for an annual baseball game scheduled to be held on Thursday. Scalise is reported to be in stable condition at a Washington hospital after being shot in the hip. 4 other people were wounded when the lone gunman opened fire on the early morning practice. Moments ago, President Donald Trump announced that the suspected shooter has died, apparently from wounds sustained in a gun battle with police. We'll hear from the president shortly, but first, let's hear from Arizona Senator Jeff Flake, who was at the scene when Scalise was shot.
I hope Steve's okay. I did call his wife. I got his phone and called his wife to make sure that when she woke up she didn't hear news that, and let her know that I thought that he was certainly going to be okay.
Well, a short time ago at the White House, President Donald Trump spoke about the shooting.
Shortly after 7 a.m. this morning, a gunman opened fire on members of Congress and their staffs as they were practicing for tomorrow's annual charity baseball game. Authorities are continuing to investigate the crime, and the assailant has now died from his injuries. The FBI is leading the investigation and will continue to provide updates as new information becomes available. Congressman Steve Scalise, a member of House leadership, was shot and badly wounded and is now in stable condition at the hospital, along with 2 very courageous Capitol police officers. At least 2 others were also wounded. Many lives would have been lost if not for the heroic actions of the 2 Capitol police officers who took down the gunman despite sustaining gunshot wounds during a very, very brutal assault. Melania and I are grateful for their heroism and praying for the swift recovery of all victims.
Well, according to multiple media reports, law enforcement officials have identified the man suspected of opening fire at the congressional baseball practice as 66-year-old James T. Hodgkinson from Belleville, Illinois, a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. Now, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has vociferously denied any collusion with Russia to sway last year's presidential election. Appearing before a Senate panel, Sessions defended President Trump's decision to fire former FBI Director James Comey, but repeatedly refused to discuss any conversations involving the president. VOA's Michael Bowman has the details.
America's top law enforcement officer sought to dispel the mystery surrounding meetings he had with Russia's ambassador while serving as a top campaign backer of Donald Trump, encounters he did not acknowledge during his confirmation hearing.
I have never met with or had any conversation with any Russians or any foreign officials concerning any type of interference with any campaign or election in the United States. Further, I have no knowledge of any such conversations by anyone connected to the Trump campaign.
The former senator pushed back hard on any suggestion that he colluded with Russia.
Appalling and detestable lie.
The Attorney General said he recused himself from the Russia investigation to adhere with regulations, not because he did anything wrong. Sessions testified just days after former FBI Director James Comey made cryptic reference to additional factors that would have made Sessions' participation in the Russia probe problematic.
What are they? There are none. I can tell you that for absolute certainty.
Sessions said he concurred with the president's decision to fire Comey, that a fresh start was needed at the FBI. When pressed that the Russia probe prompted Comey's dismissal, the Attorney General said he would let the president speak for himself.
So you'd had no verbal conversation with him about the firing of Mr. Comey?
I'm not able to discuss with you or confirm or deny the nature of private conversations that I may have had with the president.
Democrats' tempers flared.
You're impeding this investigation.
Sessions said the president has a right to keep his conversations confidential, but acknowledged Trump has yet to invoke that right. Some Republicans came to his defense. One compared the allegation of collusion with Russia to an outlandish spy novel.
Have you ever, in any of these fantastical situations, heard of a plot line so ridiculous that a sitting United States senator and an ambassador of a foreign government colluded at an open setting with hundreds of other people to pull off the greatest caper?
Democrats saw nothing to chuckle about.
I'm not sure that if there was collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, that it was Senator Jeff Sessions from Alabama and the Russian ambassador that were the principals. But the hearing today does seem to raise more questions than it answers.
Media reports say Trump was enraged by Sessions' recusal from the Russia probe, something the Attorney General would neither confirm nor deny. Michael Bowman, VOA News, the Capitol.
Well, the influx of South Sudan refugees into Uganda has caught the attention of U.S. lawmakers who are calling for an end to the country's political conflict that has seen thousands of people lose their lives and millions more displaced. Africa 54's Esther Ewart sat down with Congressman Chris Smith, who recently returned from Uganda's Bidibidi refugee camp.
Congressman Chris Smith led a delegation of U.S. lawmakers to the Bidibidi camp in Uganda, which is now home to thousands of South Sudanese refugees.
One of the things that struck me the most was how welcoming Uganda is of the refugees. Matter of fact, they made a point of saying they're not refugees, they're our brothers and sisters.
In the last 1 month, the World Food Programme slashed food rations by half, forcing some of the refugees to steal food from the local communities.
There is some shortages of food. Rations were cut because of inadequate funding. The United States, for its part, is the largest donor by far. So we need to do more, in my opinion. But the European Union and others need to step up as well with money for the World Food Programme and for medicines and shelter that's being provided.
Uganda is hosting over 900,000 refugees from South Sudan, and Congressman Smith says the displacement is directly linked to the conflict.
The famine that's being experienced in some areas is directly attributable to conflict.
East African regional leaders have attempted but failed in their efforts to mediate peace in South Sudan. Smith says Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, whom he met during the visit, is in the best position to talk to South Sudan's leader.
I think in terms of influence, he might even have the greatest influence on Salva Kiir, and the other nations in the region need to step up and say to Salva Kiir, that's it. Peace is the only alternative now. That's it.
His discussion with South Sudanese President Salva Kiir in Juba last month follows a meeting in August 2016 in which he recalls atrocities committed by Kiir's soldiers who raped local and foreign humanitarian aid workers and killed a journalist.
I said, zero tolerance on sexual abuse, Mr. President, and you need to promulgate a rule in your military and security forces. I was very blunt. Our aid is contingent on human rights criteria too.
So did President Salva Kiir take any responsibility for what is going on in his country?
He didn't put it in terms of taking responsibility, but he did talk about making changes. I mentioned to him that they need a modern military that obeys the rule of law and the chain of command understands human rights norms from top to bottom, from general to private, that the abuse of civilians is absolutely actionable by prosecution, and a zero tolerance on all sexual harassment of every kind.
South Sudan's civil war erupted in December 2013. The fighting has killed thousands of people and displaced nearly 4 million people, including 1.8 million who have sought refuge in neighboring countries. 2 million are internally displaced. Astigidu Ewart, VOA News, Washington.
Well, British Prime Minister Theresa May and French President Emmanuel Macron are joining forces in order to crack down on tech companies, ensuring they set up the efforts to combat terrorism online. May traveled to Paris Tuesday to hold talks on counter-terrorism measures with Macron. Britain and France face similar challenges in fighting homegrown Islamist extremism and share similar scars from deadly attacks that rocked London, Manchester, Paris and Nice.
We need to improve access to encrypted content in a way that the confidentiality of exchanges is respected, and in order to prevent the usage of social networks by terrorists or criminals. We need to step up international cooperation, especially in the United States, and in order to improve access to digital proofs that are used in our police and judicial investigations, wherever this data is located.
Well, Prime Minister May says the campaign includes exploring the possibility of legal penalties against tech companies if they fail to take the necessary action to remove unacceptable content. Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54, the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. You're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends also. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Coming up, East Africa leads the way in African business, while the continent retains its position as the second fastest growing continent globally. Stay with us.
I'm Jeff Selden, and I work the National Security Beat. National Security Beat is anything that affects the national security of the United States, from counterterrorism to surveillance to even relations with Russia. It's one of the most fascinating beats you can have. It's probably one of the more important beats that you can cover because it touches on so many areas of the world, so many areas of people's day-to-day lives. I'm Jeff Selden, and my beat is national security.
I'm Millar Sega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Well, in Wednesday's business news, East Africa is the primary driver of growth in Africa, with Ethiopia leading the way. Joining us now from New York is Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrino. Hello, Jill.
Hi, good morning. Well, while the continent's major economies were hit by the fall in commodity prices in 2016, Africa retained its position as the second fastest growing continent globally, recording an average of 2.2% GDP growth, only behind South Asia, and that's according to the African Development Bank Group. East Africa outperformed with a growth rate of 5.3%, driven by strong performance in Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Djibouti. I would expect that to continue with the latest rail infrastructure in place that we've reported on. Southern Africa recorded a 1.1% average due to the poor performance of South Africa. Now, West Africa was at the bottom, averaging just about 0.5% growth rate, despite good performances by Côte d'Ivoire and Senegal, which were canceled out by recession and socio-political factors that bogged down the economy to about 1.5% growth. Nigeria and South Africa, they accounted for the largest share of Africa's GDP, with 29% and 19% respectively, so you could see why they're so important when you look at growth rates.
Now, does the Africa Development Bank expect African growth to continue?
Well, the bank estimates that its high 5 priorities: light up and power Africa, feed Africa, industrialize Africa, integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life for the people of Africa, that would spearhead the continent's economic diversification and growth and broad-based economic opportunities that will shield the continent from future commodity shocks and enhance their resilience. However, the report also cited rising debt, structural weaknesses, power outages, climate change, conflicts, political instability, and terrorism among some of the downside risks, which can't be ignored either.
Now, how much more could the African economy improve?
Well, the report said African economies would improve further to average 3.4% growth in 2018, followed by 4.3% in 2018, driven largely by growing domestic demand and good performing countries. Other factors include improved supply conditions and a good business environment, prudent macroeconomic management, favorable external financial flows, and high public spending. The report notes that while natural resources and primary commodities remain major growth drivers, their importance has declined, while domestic factors, including consumption demand, now play a greater role.
Well, Jill, thank you very much. As always, we look forward to your next report. That's Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrino reporting live from New York. Now, solar power is lighting up the night sky in Jordan and making life easier for the 20,000 Syrian refugees at a camp that once had no reliable source of electricity. VOA's Faith Lapidus reports.
Azraq is the second largest Syrian refugee camp in Jordan. Since it opened more than 2 years ago, the camp residents have lived without reliable access to electricity. The newly inaugurated solar plant, funded by the IKEA Foundation, will change that.
It means the world to refugees that obviously are here in the camp that didn't have access to electricity in a dependable way. It means lighting for safety, for protection at night, for some cool in terms of a fan on a hot summer's day, or some heat in the winter during the cold months.
Farhan Nazal says having reliable power means freedom.
Before electricity, we could not come and go as we please. At sunset, we would be confined to our homes. Now that we have electricity, we can go to our neighbor's house, enjoy the evening, or our neighbors can come over. It is more enjoyable, we have fun, and are happier.
And kids can watch TV, although that's not the benefit that's most important to Anas Ahmed.
To begin with, students, for example, my children can now study with lights on. Secondly, it was very hot in the caravan. Now I have a fan. We also have a fridge now, so we have cool water and can preserve our food. And a washing machine. I previously had to transfer water and my wife would wash clothes by hand. It's a lot easier for her now.
The plant's construction has also provided work opportunities for some 50 refugees who were trained and employed to build and set up the solar panels. They now have skills to maintain and operate the plant and apply them elsewhere to find work outside the refugee camp. I'm Faith Lapidus, VOA News.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, wildlife poaching and trafficking leaves some of Africa's most iconic species in danger. We'll be right back.
Area here, and within this camp specifically we've seen
Welcome back. Now, poaching and wildlife trafficking have left some of Africa's most iconic species endangered. The loss of the animals has cost African countries critical tourism revenue. One national park is getting a second chance. Liwonde National Park in southern Malawi recently welcomed some new inhabitants. Those are 4 cheetahs relocated from South Africa by the non-profit African Parks. Lamek Masina has our report.
The rangers lured the cheetah out into its new home with a fresh carcass. This is the first cheetah Malawi has had in the wild in 2 decades. The cheetah is the fastest land animal in the world, but even that couldn't protect the species in Malawi. Poachers killed off the cheetah's prey and ultimately the cheetahs themselves.
They were last seen within Malawi about 20 years ago. And specifically in the Liwonde area, they've been absent for over 100 years. So as part of the rehabilitation of the park, we feel that it's very important to bring back the cheetah to Malawi and Liwonde specifically.
A total of 4 cheetahs, 2 males and 2 females, were airlifted to Liwonde from South Africa in May. The cheetahs spent their first 3 weeks in this enclosure getting acclimated. Liwonde National Park has a population of 12,000 large mammals. These include bushbuck, water buffalo and antelope. The cheetah is the first large predator to be reintroduced to the park.
We have a very healthy animal base, and now that the protection measures are in place, we've got very good law enforcement in the park. The numbers of animals are increasing very rapidly. And as a result of that, there is more than enough animals to provide for some carnivorous animals such as the cheetah.
Meanwhile, the officials are holding meetings with the communities surrounding the park.
Those people are likely to face dangers. And our message to the communities is to say, can they refrain from entering the park and doing what they used to be doing? Because these animals, definitely, they are dangerous. They can kill a human being.
Park officials say they soon plan to also reintroduce leopards and lions to restore the park's lost glory. Lamek Masina for VOA News, Liwonde, Malawi.
Well, and that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to the Break Africa. That's between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. For all of us here at VOA, good night from Washington. Good night.
Voice of America today is a window in which we have to see delivering the messages for contacting the people wherever they are. And Albanian people, as people of a small country, need to have such and deserve to have such information from the United States and from all around the world. So it's a bridge. Voice of America, it's a bridge between entire world and Albanian citizens.